Today I'll be talking about the new recipes API, which is pretty new in Drupal, and recently it got committed to Drupal core, Drupal 10.3 core, and it'll be available in Drupal 10, Drupal 11. So we'll be discussing about what are recipes and what are not recipes, what recipes do, and what recipes cannot do and won't be doing it in future as well. A breakdown or the anatomy of a recipe, how it works, and what are the different files and what are different directories that you need to set up a recipe, and how to use it, and a brief demo of applying a recipe or recipe to a site to see how it works. So before we see what are recipes, brief historical backgrounds. So since Drupal 5, there has been a key Drupal feature that is Drupal distributions or installation profiles. I believe like everyone have come across it and used it to set up or spin up new Drupal websites, whether it's a commerce website or it's a media website using Thunder, right? So it has been there for quite some time, since Drupal 5 when we're in Drupal 10. But there are a few problems. There have been a lot of issues or a lot of drawbacks which people used to face while using a distribution or an installation profile. So it is very difficult to, like once we start a project, you cannot apply a distribution. You cannot install a distribution once a Drupal site is installed, because then there are core Drupal installation profiles like standard or minimal. Once a Drupal is installed using a distribution, you cannot apply to it. You cannot reinstall another distribution. So when you start with a distribution, you're stuck with it. You cannot switch between it and removing it. It's a pretty hard job to do. It's pretty complicated task. It's a pretty hard thing to switch a distribution or remove a distribution from the code base. And Drupal.org generally don't support distributions. So like modules which you can host on Drupal.org, distributions have their own structure. They have their own repository, which basically like not supported as of now in Drupal.org. And it is pretty hard to maintain for the release cycles. And you have to be dependent on the Drupal on a distribution maintainers for updates. So if I'm creating or maintaining a distribution or an installation profile, and a site is spin up or a site is using it, I need to keep my distribution updated with the latest Drupal releases, with the latest module releases or plugins releases, so that people can start using it. Unless I updated, any website which is using the distribution cannot update or will have outdated modules and even Drupal core. So to handle all these issues or the problems, the recipes initiative was kickstarted. So it allows the automation of Drupal modules and configurations via a user interface that will be there. Like it's not direct. Like in future, there will be a interface where you can, browse recipes and install them. So that's where the project browser comes in. But right now, there is a terminal, there is a PHP runner command that is used to apply recipes. So what does a recipe do? With a recipe, you can install modules, you can install themes to a Drupal website. You can apply different, the default configurations that are provided by a module. Apart from that, you can apply those configurations selectively if you don't want to, have all those configurations from a module, but you want to apply only selective configurations from a module. You can apply those. You can provide new configurations. So for example, if I want to add a new content type, so those configurations can be provided into my recipe. There's a composable structure. By composable structure, I mean you can define a recipe that can be used in some other recipe. You can just like have a dependency on some other recipe, and it doesn't lock your sites in. So a recipe can be added at any point of time, at any point of a project timeline, whether it's installed via any installation profile or distribution. It can be applied to a Drupal website, and that's its job. You can, after that, you can safely remove that recipe. And lastly, the new thing that is being introduced in recipes are update configurations via actions, which you'll see in a bit. So what are actions? So basically, you can alter or update configurations which are provided by modules. So for example, if a module is providing, for example, let's say hide seconds, right? So by default, the hide second value or the flag is set to true. But when I apply the recipe, that value has to be set as false. So those type of configuration updates can be applied via the configuration actions. But what are not recipes? What recipes cannot do? So recipes does not have a privilege or the functionality to provide any kind of hooks or APIs or any kind of custom code. You don't have a module file, you don't have a plugins, you don't have forms, you cannot have the generic Drupal module structure that you cannot have inside a recipe. It does not provide you any custom functionalities or custom code or custom hooks or any kind of APIs. And once it is applied to a part of the site, once it is applied to a site, it is not part of the site at all. Once recipe is applied, and its job is done, you have a starting point, and from there you do like you can proceed as per your requirements. So recipes does not lock into your site. It's not a hard requirement for your site to run. So once it is applied, you can proceed from there. It gives you a starting point for the functionality that you need. So for example, if I want to set up a search functionality using Solar, right? So I'll spin up a recipe which will install all those modules, which will install all the search API module, the search API search API Solar module. And let's say I want to have autocomplete features, so the search API autocomplete module. So those modules will get installed. What are the different configurations that needs to be provided? A default search server, a default index, and what are the content types or the fields that needs to be indexed. So all these configurations will be packaged inside the recipe. And once it is applied to a site, you can just forget about it. You can remove it. It can stay. It doesn't matter. It doesn't have any role of it after once it's applied. But from there, you have a starting point to actually implement and work on the search feature instead of like spending time or putting in efforts of spinning up or creating those search servers and search index and all those configurations that are required to have a search functionality. So breaking down a recipe or what are different files that you require for having a recipe is the main file is a recipe.yml file. It is where you define the metadata of a recipe. What is the name of the recipe? What is the description of it? And apart from that, you can have different configurations. So for example, whether if there is any dependent recipe that needs to be run before your recipe needs to be applied, you can define those. What are the modules that needs to be installed? What are the themes that needs to be installed? And what are the configurations that needs to be imported during the installation of the recipe? And lastly, what are the configuration actions or the configuration updates that needs to be done on certain configurations? So all these information or all these setup will be going inside the recipe.yml file. The composer.json file will be used so that it is discoverable via composer.json. So if I want to have a recipe to be reused somewhere or to be reused, like on multiple sites, Drupal.org as of now doesn't have a provision to host recipes. But yeah, you can put it on GitHub and in packages, by which you can just do a composer require Specbee / this is sample recipe. So that way you can, like discover more recipes or add new recipes to your projects. So that's where the composer.json file comes in picture, where you also do the requirements for your recipes. So if my recipe is dependent on, let's say, the meta tags module and the path auto modules, so all those composer dependencies will be defined in the composer.json file. And apart from that, there will be two directories. One is the config directory and the content directory. So config directory will hold the configurations that will be installed when the recipe is applied, and content will hold the YAML files of the, if you want to have any default content when you're applying the recipe. Now, default content is something like which is like not there in core. So if you want to have a default content needs to be installed or created when your recipe is applied, we still have to use the default content contributed module, export those contents as YAML file and put them inside the content folder. So if I go to the recipes.yml file, as I said, like you need the name. What is the name of the recipe? For example, it's a sample recipe, a description of the recipe, what it does. Then comes the recipes section, where you will define the dependent recipes that needs to be applied before your recipe is getting applied. The path to the recipe will be relative. So if your recipes are inside one single folder, you can directly call it like some other recipe is being called. But another recipe is on a different path, so that path needs to be relative to the doc root of your Drupal site. The install section will define all the modules that needs to be installed when a recipe is getting applied. Again, it doesn't matter like if a recipe is, like a sample recipe is installing, let's say, a path auto module, and some other recipe also has an install for path auto module. Drupal will not throw any error, because if it is already installed, it will just move on. So under install, you can install, define all those modules and all those themes. If you want to have a theme, you can also define the themes which needs to be installed. The config section is an interesting one, where you can either import configurations or have actions to update some configurations. So if you want to import all the configurations from a module, we'll just give the module name and give a star for it. That will imply that all the configurations which are in the module's install directory and the optional directory will get installed, irrespective of like whether they will get installed or not. When my recipe is applied, all the configuration has to be imported, right? And actions will allow you to update any configuration. So for example, there is a configuration called module 2.settings. And inside the module 2.settings, there is some setting which has a value of null. But when I apply my recipe, I want that module 2.settings.some settings in the flag needs to be set to be, let's say, test. So I'll define a config action which will update the module 2.settings configuration and update that some setting flag to, or some setting configuration key to, a test value. So this way you can update configurations. You can add actions to your to the settings that needs to be, that are getting applied, and you can also selectively, like if you don't want like under module 1, you don't want all the configurations to be installed, you can define that, yeah, from module 1 import configuration 1, configuration 2, and configuration 5. I don't want all the configurations to be installed. So you can selectively install modules, selectively install configurations as well from a module. Now coming to the composer.json file, as I said, it's a standard composer.json file, where you define the name of the recipe, the package, the description of the package. The type is something that will allow you to allow composer to understand what type of package it is, which will see how why this type is a crucial key here. So the type will be defined as Drupal recipe, and you can require like what are the modules or what are the themes that needs to be installed or required by your recipe. It's a straightforward like composer JSON file where you require all the dependencies for your package. Under config, as I like, you can define the configurations for all the configurations, all the configurations that are required by your recipe when it's getting applied. For example, if I have a content type which needs to be created when my recipe is getting applied, all the configuration files for my recipe, like the node type for that content type, the field storages, the field configurations, the form display, the entity view display, all those configurations will be residing under the config folder. And if I want to have certain default contents when my recipes are getting applied, so all those will go inside the content folder, the content directory, which is again like divided into multiple directories, like whether it's a file, whether it's a media, whether it's a node, taxonomy. All those YAML files or the exported content YAML files will go inside the content directory. So whenever there is the recipe gets applied, the default contents get implemented or created based on your published, unpublished, all the metadata will get imported. Now to set up a recipe, we need a composer package, that is the composer installer extender. So in a Drupal site, we need to require this composer package to allow composer to detect composer recipes, Drupal recipes. And inside the composer.json file, if you have noticed, there are installer types where we define different installer types, like whether it's a npm asset or a bower asset. Similarly, we need to add a Drupal recipe asset under installer types. And in the installer paths, will define where your recipes will be downloaded when you apply it by composer. So I've defined it like doc.root recipes, the name of the composer, and that is the Drupal type recipe. So you see, like whenever composer detects that the type is Drupal recipe, it will download it inside the doc.root recipes directory. So that's why in composer.json file, the type Drupal recipe is a necessity, so that composer can understand like what type of package it is or what type of installer it is or an asset is it, and accordingly it will download the package inside that directory. And to apply a recipe, it is like a PHP script that is inside Drupal core. So you need to like core Drupal script like PHP core Drupal recipe is the command, and give the relative path to the recipe directory where it will be relative to your doc.root. So if it is inside core, it will be core / recipe / standard. So, and if it is your custom recipe or download recipe, it can be recipe / sample recipe. So with the core script, it will just apply your recipe or install all the modules, apply all the configurations, do the configuration updates and everything. And if there is no error, it will be applied and you have a starting point for your functionality. The thing here is, if at any point of time the recipe fails to apply or to get applied to a site, all the configuration updates that were installed, all the configurations that were applied will be rolled back to the previous state or the state before which the recipe was getting applied. And this will allow you that, yeah, if a recipe fails, the site is not breaking, right? It will not apply an recipe with errors that applying your recipe will break the site. If there is some errors in the recipe that after the recipe is getting applied, the recipe application failed, the PHP, the Drupal core script failed, it will revert back to the previous state of configurations the Drupal site was. Here I have a vanilla Drupal site where it's not installed yet. It's a fresh site which is like I need to install. Now we'll see like how to apply recipes and how to set up a site using recipes. So yeah. Okay. Okay. So to as I said, to apply a recipe, we have this recipe command, but our site is not installed. And as we all know that we need a distribution to install a site, whether it's a standard, whether it's a minimal, whether it's like some lightning or accuracy invest, any distribution that is required. A distribution is required to install a recipe, but sorry, to install a Drupal site. But with recipes, you can actually install or set up a Drupal site without any distribution profile, without any distribution or an installation profile. So if I do a install, the standard profile which is there, the standard distribution or the installation profile that is there that we all know, which we generally use to install a site, is a recipe now. So you can directly install a site using the standard recipes. So if I apply it, it will start it's saying it will set up the database, it will install the recipe, it will set up all those modules. Now it will take a couple of minutes. Let's just dive into the recipes. Yeah. So I said like this is the standard recipe, standard profiles recipes. So what it does is like it is actually broken down all the functionalities that is required by standard into multiple different recipes. So you have a basic block type, you have shortcuts, article comments, tags. All these are divided, or all these are made as composable recipes that can be applied or that can be used to install a certain functionality. So for example, I have a page content type. So page content type is a recipe here, which the standard profile is referring to or requiring to. That will just install your or create a page content type. So it will install the node and the path module, and it will import all these configurations from the node module. And if you go inside the config, you have your node page type, you have your the page body field, the entity view display, entity default and teaser, and the form display. So all these configurations are packaged inside the page content type, which is again referred or required by the standard profile to install a site, or to install the standard profile or the standard installation profile to set up a site. So you actually don't need a distribution as per se to install or set up a Drupal site right now. You can directly start using recipes to install or set up a new site. So as I said, like we have installed the site, using the standard profile, and you have installed Drupal. This is your config username and password. It's already installed. So if I visit the site, yep. So this is the standard Drupal installation with the Olivero theme, with all its configurations that comes with standard, right? Your default page, your site, and everything is set up. Now I want to add, or I want to apply a recipe that is called a event content type. Now this event content type is residing under my web recipes event content type recipe. Let me just start applying the recipe. It will take a little while. In the meantime, let me cover what's there here. So firstly, let's cover what's there in the recipe.yml file. So it's the name. What's the name of the recipe? It's a human readable name. Most like this will be used for the project browser to detect or display the names of the recipes. It's similar to how we have in modules, the name and the description. Here, I'm requiring two code recipes. Instead of the standard recipe, I'm requiring two individual code recipes. One is the image media type. That is so. Yep. So one is the image media type that installs the image media or creates the image media bundle for it, and the editorial workflow that will set up your editorial workflow with the draft, published, archived states, and the whole content moderation stuff. And what it will install is it will install the address module, all these modules, the datetime range, media library, geolocation, meta tags, path auto. All these modules will get installed when my recipe is getting applied. Under actions, I'm just importing the smart date as it is. I'm not importing like individual configurations from smart date or any of the modules. And under actions, I'm updating the meta tags settings and updating adding the event content type under basic and advanced meta tag settings, and adding my content type to the editorial workflow. So this way you can update your configurations. So if I don't have this, or if I don't add these actions, what will happen is once my recipes applied, it will not be added to the editorial workflow. So I have to go to the editorial workflow and select event or the content type which my recipe is creating to the editorial workflow. Same for the meta tag settings. Then I have the config where I have all the fields for different, for my content type, the paragraph types, the views, and everything. And here I have the contents. So I have two default contents which gets created when the recipe gets applied. Two nodes which have 4 media items and 4 file items. So all these are exported via default content module. So if I show you the composer.json file, the root composer.json file, do I have it here? Yeah. So I have the default content module here, which actually gives you a Drush command to export contents for certain type into YAML files, and you can just copy those files into your recipes content directory. And I have a composer.json file that will allow Composer to discover my recipes when I push it to packages. And I have the requires for or required all the modules that my recipe installs. So that will ensure that when I do, let's say, Composer require Malabar / event content type, all these modules gets installed or downloaded into the code base when my recipe gets applied. So my recipe has applied, and yeah, all those. What are the modules that are installed? It will show all the modules that are installed. There are contents created for events content type, and these are the recipes that got applied. It went without any errors, but if I directly apply and go here, it will give me a. I just need to clear the cache. So yep, as I installed the recipes, and it created two content types for me. Sorry, two contents for me. One for sorry, one no, sorry, both are event contents that that gets created after my recipes are getting applied. And it's a you can see the content, like I've used the title, you have your image, your event details. I've used layout builder for it to structure it, and all those configurations gets imported. I have the show more and show less functionality for my speakers bio, and all these functionalities are added once my recipes are getting applied. And that's all you have for recipes. So is there any questions?
Hi guys, thank you for watching. I had an amazing time learning all the new things here at Specbee's TechX. And if you did too, do let us know in the comments below. Keep following Specbee for the latest trends in technology. See you in the next one.